If you are trying to do an episode a week, you should not be doing it by yourself. That is the only way that you're going to be able to keep it up for the long term.
How do I get a successful podcast in 2025?
You got to start. The thing that drove the success of our show, I would say, is
with over 400 episodes and partnerships with global giants like NVIDIA and Dell.
Tyler Campbell has redefined what it means to build a podcast empire.
Accountability. What is that? What do you mean with that when it comes to podcasts?
on average 7 episodes. That's how long a podcast will last. Only reason we were able to make it to 400 episodes on our show is because of accountability.
Why did you choose to go from 1 episode per week to 2 episodes per week though?
The second episode is a 5-minute Friday. Really short and sweet, just sharing some thoughts. So you can't be unhappy with your editor for producing crap when you haven't given them any guidance. If you're not interested in what you're talking about, you're not going to do it for a very, very long time. So in 2025, we're focusing on...
Tyler, how do I get a successful podcast in 2025?
You got to start.
That's a pretty good tip.
You actually got to start doing it. And then you gotta stay consistent with it for a very, very long time.
So what is consistent?
Consistent is something that's predictable for your audience, right? And also for you. So like we started out where we did 1 episode per week, which was a lot.
It is.
And then we bumped it up to 2 episodes per week, which is it's double what we did. So yeah, right. So it was a lot more. And the thing that drove the success of our show, I would say, is building systems, having accountability in place to maintain that release schedule. All right. So that is a lot. That's a big lift. If you are trying to do an episode a week, you should not be doing it by yourself. I'll say that much. Unless it's your full-time job, unless it's all you do. That is the only way that you're going to be able to keep it up for the long term, especially if you run businesses like I do. If you are a business owner and you're looking to start a show, you need to delegate this thing. And the only reason it's going to continue on is if you delegate it to the right person, the person that's going to be able to grab you by the ear, get you in the studio, get you in front of somebody that you're actually interested in talking to, and actually opening your mouth and doing the thing. Right? That's how you build a successful podcast. It's easy. There you go. 3, 2, 1. Go.
Yeah, there we go. Simple, but not easy. Oh, easy, but not simple. I've never sure the right English here. There is so much to unpack here. I love this. That's one of the first things that you mentioned is actually the first time I hear about, I think, from guests on this show. Accountability. What is that? What do you mean with that when it comes to podcast?
Let me give you an example. Okay.
Yeah.
So one, just to kind of set the stage here. I have ADHD. Like a lot of entrepreneurs do, honestly, like a lot of us, right?
Yeah.
And what I started to find over time is that I needed people around me that didn't have ADHD, that could keep their head in the game and keep moving things forward, even while my head was in the clouds looking at other stuff. I needed that stuff. And so the first thing that I did when we started up this show is I went out and we, my brother and I, we hired an editor. And now we were only doing audio at the time. So we would find the person we want to record with, send out a little Zoom invite, and set up the recording time and go start yakking with them. And we would get done with our recording. We would pass that MP3 file over to our editor. He would cut it up in Adobe Audition and make it all sound pretty and stuff. And then we would release it, right? The key there was the editor. Because if Eddie and I had just started the show and we said, we're going to do this thing, and Tyler, I'm going to be the one that edits it, what happens? It's going to fall on its face within the first 2 episodes. And I don't know what the statistic is now. It might be less, it might be more. But when we first started, the statistic was 7 episodes. That's how long a podcast will last. On average, 7 episodes. It might be different now because we have more podcasts out there in the space.
It's 3, actually. 90% of people don't make it past episode 3. And of those who do, 90% of those people don't make it past episode 20.
The only reason we were able to make it to 400 episodes on our show is because of accountability. It's because I had Austin sitting there saying, hey, what's the next episode? And I was paying him. That's another function, is like you put your money towards it, then you're like, no, I want that person working. I want that person on it. I want them actually producing something for me and achieving the mission that I have set out, basically cast a vision for. So accountability looks like that. You got to have somebody sitting there who their sole job is to keep this train on the rails and keep it moving forward. And a lot of people don't do that. That you run into a lot of issues if you don't have that accountability in place.
So did you say that you hired an editor from the get-go?
Yes.
So, I mean, I love this, but I want to challenge it, right? Also from what I hear from a lot of podcasters. When you start out, you don't even know if you're going to have a podcast that's going to be even remotely successful, right? Let alone enough to pay almost for a full-time person, or at least for a qualified editor, right? What made you and your brother choose to, from the get-go, hire an editor?
The whole idea behind going out and hiring somebody initially is that we didn't have anybody else doing any marketing. We weren't paying anybody else to market our business. And so it was a pretty easy thing for us to just say, yeah, we'll take a $20 an hour gamble on this. Like we had another business that was completely thriving. It was profitable and stuff. And so, yeah, we'll take a risk. Let's see what happens. And then it kind of morphed and it changed into some other reasons behind why we do it. But initially it was, we wanted to have a voice in the construction industry. We wanted to have a voice out there saying like, hey, we know what we're talking about. Now we quickly realized we don't know what we're talking about and we're extremely dumb in comparison to a lot of the people out there in the construction space. If you want to be humbled, start a podcast. I mean, a lot of really smart people. And they're not you. Exactly. So, and for me, like, that's how we justified it. Is that we had a successful business already. And then we were able to just hire somebody part-time. Didn't need to be full-timer, just part-timer.
Yeah.
Edit the show and do that. I will say this though, we may approach it completely different if we were to start it today because of the AI tools that are now coming into play. Those things are kind of changing some things. Like, the app we're using right now, Riverside. There are a lot of really cool tools out there in the space that you may not need to pay somebody part-time to go out and do. But I would still urge you to get that as soon as you can, because it's different when you have a human being looking at you and tapping their foot than you have an app in front of you. There's something about that. It switches something in your brain and it says, they're going to be bored if I don't give them something to do. And so it forces your hand and it makes you go and record and just keep going.
Now, that's super interesting. So by accountability, you also mean, well, you made that financial commitment. You have somebody sitting there part-time.
Yes.
And you're like, no, I need to do something. Otherwise, I literally made a commitment and a financial decision that is not paying off. Love that. So, I mean, there is so much to dig into here. 400 episodes. Why did you choose to go from 1 episode per week to 2 episodes per week, though?
Yeah. All right. So to clarify, the first episode is going to be 45 minutes long, around that.
Okay.
5-minute conversation. And then the second episode is a 5-minute Friday. So it's really short and sweet, where Eddie and I, my brother and I, are just sharing some thoughts, just saying like, here's what we're reading. We recommend this, go try this out, check this out, project management, tips and tricks. And, hey, here's a cool AI tool that we found, things like that, right? Self-help type stuff. So we found ourselves interviewing a ton of people, but also having some other ideas that we would want to share out there with our listeners. And so that's how the 5-minute Fridays kind of started up. And, there are 5-minute Fridays out there that have way more episode listens than our full episodes. And I think it's just simply due to the fact that it's just a quick hit of something, something nice. I'm not even going to say that it was my idea initially. I want to name Neil Patel and Eric Sue.
Big names.
Yeah, big names. They have a podcast that does essentially the same thing. It's under 5 minutes and it's just bam, just quick hitting info, right? And I found it super valuable. And so, I was like, hey, what if we did that for what we do? And a lot of it was more based around encouraging people and, kind of saying like, hey, you got this, or like, hey, let's try to get better today. Because the main premise behind our show is we want to share ideas and we want to encourage people, right? And so that's our chance to be able to do that, because we can curate what a guest says, we'll say. We can curate that. But we can like control what we say in a 5-minute Friday and say it in just the right way to get our point across. And it allows us to get a little bit preachy with it, get up on our soapbox for a minute. And it's a lot of fun, Sometimes they're just crazy too, but it's an episode. And it has to go through the same motion as a full episode. It's the same process to get from recorded to released. Same process happens within. Only change is who's coming up with the idea. What are we going to talk about? That's the only difference. Because with a guest, you can kind of say, that interests me. I want to go there. With a 5-Minute Friday, we have to say, what interests me and what do I want to say? And so there's a little bit more introspect that goes into that. But the process from start to finish, who's involved, same thing.
Do you spend more time prepping for the 5 minutes episode than you do for the guest episodes?
I would like to say yes, but most of the time those are shot from the hip.
Shot from the hip.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'll use this term again.
There we go.
Yes, so a lot of times they are just, we will come up with an idea, or Eddie and I will talk and we'll say, this is really interesting. Maybe we have a quick little conversation about that, or we'll be reading something, we'll see a quote that we really like, and that's the quote that we share, and we just challenge people when we talk about it. So, it can take a lot of time to develop a 5-Minute Friday. Now, we've had full episodes that definitely take longer, and those are the more historical pieces where we dig into certain details, where we have a person who conducts research for us and finds the interesting stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense. So talk to me a bit more about Construction Bro then, because I suppose you started those 5-minute episodes because you also wanted to give something else or more to the industry. So why the Construction Brothers? Why did you choose the podcast format? And why not a YouTube channel, for instance, if you're just doing 5-minute videos, right? What's the whole story behind it?
Well, honestly, it's when we started it in 2019, podcasting was really kind of the thing. And so
all the hype.
And I feel like it's switched. YouTube is kind of like, it was there. YouTube was there. But podcasting on YouTube wasn't as big at that moment. And so we went audio only, but also I've got a face for radio. This I know. And so I was like, all right, no, we're just doing audio here. It was also cheaper for us too. It was a lower barrier for entry.
True.
Whereas right now, where we do have video, I've got 3 cameras around me. I've got a lot more in getting the video done than I did just with the audio. The audio was set up a Rodecaster, pipe in a computer, have some mics, and we're good to go, right? With the video front, we had a lot more that needed to go into it. So, that's the main reason for the format, us starting with audio and with podcast. And then eventually we kind of made our way over to YouTube and we started posting stuff there. We're still figuring that out though, honestly. So it's a long game.
No, 100%. When you mentioned systems, what do you mean with that?
What I mean by that is, I feel like we can kind of go back and forth over the meaning of a true system.
Mm-hmm.
What I tend to look at it as is somebody who has a sole job to do one thing or two, right? And so for me, I wanted to map out the steps in the process of producing our podcast. We record it. We find the person that we want to interview. We record it. Then from the recording period on, what happens? We got to hand it off to our video editor. Okay, then what do we want to happen? We want it to be posted on all the podcast platforms for sure. But then what? We also want to have clips from our show. So how are we going to get that done? Who's going to own that process? Is it going to be a video editor? Okay, it is the video editor. Video editor creates clips. And then we have a meeting where he and I go through each one of those clips and we select the ones that make sense and are relevant to our audience. Because at the end of the day, I'm the subject matter expert, not my editor.
No.
That's a big one. That's a big nugget. All right.
Yeah.
If you are starting something in a niche or in a niche industry, right?
Yeah.
You are the SME, your editor is not, and you have to guide them. You have to have a voice in that. And when you do that, it resonates. If you just let your editor run amok, and that's part of the reason why I love AI, but I hate AI. And it's going to get better. But I love it and I hate it because sometimes people just pump the full podcast episode in there and it spits out a bunch of clips that are nonsense, that mean nothing to your target audience. So you have to curate. So that has to be part of the system. Who owns that? It's the SME. And then from there, how does it get to social media? All right. Who owns the process of taking those clips, uploading them, and scheduling them for social media? After that, who writes our show notes? You know, who writes the show note? Is that going to be me? No, it's not. So I need somebody for that. And so there's kind of a reconfiguring that we're doing right now. So that is what we've built up to where we have all those people in place where it passes hands and it just goes down the line, down the conveyor belt. And it's worked really well. But now we're looking at it saying, what sorts of things can we automate in this? Still maintain the human touch, but what things can we do to automate this to keep it lower cost for ourselves, but also make it a little quicker, make it so that we can, we just don't have as much overhead at the end of the day.
I want to talk about that.
Yeah.
But so to your point on SME, isn't the point to hiring an editor to actually spend less time doing all the editing stuff? Mm-hmm. So how do you, so two questions here. One, how do you choose what to fully delegate and what not to delegate? What makes your podcast successful that you cannot delegate and therefore you need to be implicated with your editor, for instance? But so what do you choose to delegate and not to when the sole purpose of hiring an editor was actually to have to spend less time on post-production?
Okay, so on the post-production front, what's the thing that it takes the most time? It's, ingesting all the footage, balancing out the audio, switching from A cam to B cam to C cam, doing stuff like that, right? That takes time. Exporting it, checking it. You got to watch it 2-3 times to make sure. You got to go through. You've got to put your intro sequence in. You got to put your outro sequence in. Then from there, so that's just your main portion of the video. Then you got to go through and then you got to cut up the clips. All right. So if you have a conversational style piece like we do, where it's just hey, how's it going, Bob? Nice to see you. Let's chat, right? That is a pretty low barrier for entry for an editor, right? Make it sound good. Put the intro in, put the outro in, cut out any issues, cut out here's how I want it to flow. I don't want a ton of ums, but I want take out 50% of the ums. All right. But leave the other ones because I don't want it to sound too robotic. I don't want it to sound too chopped. Right. And so there's that element. But that's easier for me to train somebody on a full episode. What I found is that if I give them the leash to go out and create clips, I'm not satisfied with them. And the reason why is because they will tend to go to the things that they understand. So it all ends up being about leadership, or it all ends up being about people skills and things like that. And they avoid the technical jargon that actually gets the views, actually gets the clicks on an episode or for your social media clips. Okay. So I have to be involved in that part at some point. And by letting them go create the clips, and then we have a 1-hour meeting where we just sit there and we go through everything and we say, this is good, this is not. Hey, did he say this? Can you add that back in here? Because if he says this and this and this, then it makes sense. Over time, you start training your editor what to look for, and it gets easier and easier. And then we're also coming up with titles, right? So titles as in a little banner that sits over the top of your video, right? And so we come up with the title there too, because what happens is if I hand that off to the editor completely with, sight unseen, I just let them handle it. Again, the titles are not going to be as punchy and they're not going to be relevant to the audience we're trying to speak to, commercial construction. Okay. I cannot expect my editor, who I hired from a college over here, to know what building information modeling is. They have no idea. They have no clue. They know what Premiere is. They know what an MP4 is. They know what, audio file, they know that stuff. They are a professional in that regard. So you have to step in and you have to say BIM, say RFI, say change order, say GC, say superintendent, say this, say that. And immediately what happens is it elevates what you're producing to a level that people go, oh, wow, no, they're actually creating stuff for me. And so that's where I see a lot of podcasts go wrong is they put it into AI, AI generates everything for them, or they hire an editor and they don't guide the editor and have that sort of recurring meeting with them saying like, we're going to sit here and we're going to go through clips and I'm going to train you on this stuff. Now my editor, I would fully trust it and say, go do the thing. In a pinch where I'm like, I don't have the time, you go do that. And I know he can rock it.
This is so damn good, man. And I was going to ask you, how do you operationalize training your editor for it to reflect your brand, your voice, but you've nailed it down perfectly. So let me ask you another question then. How much time does that take? Like, how much time does it take to actually train an editor to become maybe not an as good SME as you, but at least able to, identify what will do well and what will be useful for the industry, meaning you'll actually get the views, maybe not viral views, but at least views that are super relevant because converting towards your podcast, so the ones that actually matter. How long does that take?
Okay, so 2 parts of this. One, to actually just edit a full episode and everything, month, and the month is not like, here's how you open Premiere, here's how you create a prop. Like they already know the basics of that stuff. Right. The month is training them on like what you want to see and the feel that you're going for. Okay. So about a month is what it takes to get somebody in that groove. And then you have the clips side of things. There's not much training there. There's really not, because you're training on the fly. No. And so the training is consistently happening for a year, 2 years, 3 years. And eventually you do get to this point where you go, yeah, you can take it. I don't care. That's fine. But what I recommend is don't take your hand off of that. That's the thing that's going to drive the performance. And so that training's basically never complete. All right. But it's good to have a touch point with them because, again, that helps them edit the full episode. That helps them identify other things that could perform for you. You need to have that touch point. So, I would say like to, get them up and running and, creating a solid episode for you, about a month. And then the clips thing is just an iterative process. It's just going around and around and around and around and around. And eventually they get to a point where, if you're on a vacation one week, you trust them to go out and find some clips that can perform. And they actually surprise you. And you're like, wow, they've been listening a little bit more than I thought. But also, if you get that hour with them to go through these clips, you also get a chance to say, hey, when I say this is what I mean by that. And then they start to understand the industry that you work in. So if you're in insurance, let's say, and you start talking about premiums and policies and crap that I don't understand, like if you ask me at your I wouldn't know, right? So you can't be unhappy with your editor for producing crap when you haven't given them any guidance. You need to give them guidance, and you have to build the guidance into the system. You have to. Otherwise, you're going to look the same as everybody else who's putting AI content out there that is kind of lifeless. Can AI do it? Yeah, it can. It can.
100%.
But
100%.
You still have to have that touch point, man. Like, you got to realize who is the subject matter expert, and you have to leverage that person for their knowledge, because that SME is going to attract other people that are in that industry that you are trying to target. They're going to attract those people.
Amen to that. So you hinted on them a couple of times, Tyler. So talk to me about AI tools, and to put a little bit of context on this question. So when Tyler and I first chatted about potentially having an interview together, you told me that you had at some point up to 6 people working with you. And you also talk about systems, you also talk about AI. You mentioned it at the beginning of this episode, like now you can potentially use more AI tools than you could before, and that replaces some of the functions that you might have had to hire for before. So talk to me about those tools. What are the ones that you're actually using yourself, for instance?
Well, I mean, for AI, if we're just talking about AI, so one of the things that I have been, Perplexity is one of them. ChatGPT, obviously. ChatGPT can be great for show notes and things like that. But also one that's kind of a sleeper is Loom.
Okay.
Loom, that software that you use to record your face and talk people through and record SOPs and things like that.
Yep.
That one is legitimately amazing. And so that one it's really fun. So if you're trying to build out SOPs for your podcast, right?
Yeah.
You can go through and talk through everything in Loom and say, here's this, here's that, rattle everything off. Here's what I want to see. Here's what I don't want to see. And then it's got this magical button over in the right-hand corner that says convert into an SOP. And that gives you an amazing starting place for this stuff. So Loom is one that I've been going back to frequently as an AI tool that I've been using. And you can also upload footage to it or conversations to it. So I could take this conversation, upload it to Loom, get the transcript generated, and plug that into ChatGPT or any of these other softwares and get that to pump out any other type of content that I need. Are there other tools that'll do that same thing? Of course, there are. Riverside is actually one of them too, where it'll generate a transcript. So that's another thing that we did a lot back in the day. Back in 2019 when we first...
Here we go.
Yeah, here we go. But AI really wasn't a thing. And so I would actually have my wife help us out where she would generate a transcript of the whole conversation, everything that happened.
Jeez.
Okay. And so she would go through and she would basically use a tool that would clean it up a little bit, but then she would have to listen to the whole thing and go through and write out the whole transcript and get it ready to go out on our website so that it was good for SEO. So that has changed a lot. It's less manual. And so that's one of those things where it's like some of these tools like Riverside, they're getting better and better and better. And so that's the stuff we're stepping back and we're looking at and saying like, what can we implement now into our podcast tech stack just to make it easier on ourselves, make it a little more seamless, because hey, people are awesome. People are amazing. And I believe in having people inside of, your system as a part of it. But if we can extend fewer people's capabilities, that's the magic, right? 100%. So if I can give an editor the tools to go out and write the show notes and those show notes be consistently good and they can use AI, well, guess I just removed one of those stopping points in my system, right? And yeah, another thing too is using podcast editing software within Premiere. So AI has started editing all of our episodes and doing all of the camera switching. I don't know if you've seen this.
Okay, yeah, you can do that.
Yeah, so you can do that. So for camera switching and things like that, that's another thing that I actually had to press on our editor a bit and say, hey, I need you to try this. And he's like, oh no, man, I don't know.
You're replacing me step by step.
Yeah. But he was literally like, I don't know. And so he did it. And then he was like, holy cow.
Yeah, you gained so much time.
That saved me an hour and a half. And I was like, awesome. I want you to take that hour and a half and I want you to put it back into clips. Go find clips. All right. That's where we're reallocating that time. It's not that I'm not going to pay you less. I'm paying you the same amount, but I just want you to spend time on the stuff that only you can spend time on that brings value. All right.
Love that.
You sitting there changing camera angles, bad in value. That's a low value task. You finding clips that get me 100,000 views, that is the thing that provides value. So we're using AI to automate out some of those things that are just menial, that
incremental improvements.
Incremental, yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Love that. And so you have AI tools, you have systems, but you also have the setup around the podcast, right? When did you make that decision and why, to build that, let's use the words, kick-ass studio that you have, 3 cameras, awesome mics, good background, good lighting, because that's what it takes as well, right? If you really want an outstanding podcast production, you need to put in the beans.
Yeah.
What motivated you to actually do that and not remain audio only?
Partnership, for one, motivated it. So partnering with other companies. And so we wanted to, show up and show out. You wanted to dress to impress, right? And so that was an aspect of it, is that we wanted to invest in this so that, other people be interested in advertising and being a part of what we do. So that's one. But then also I'm a nerd and I just want to get more gear and I just want more stuff and more problems.
Best reason.
That's reasonable. So I like that. But also it helped us have more flexibility within the clips engine too. So like the clips that I keep coming back to, that's a big driving force behind why we get some views and our listens on the main show. it just gives us opportunities to cut up more content. And so we wanted more coverage. We used to have like a single camera setup, and we used to have like crop in on Eddie and me, and it didn't look that good. It was grainy and all that stuff. And so that's the reason we had to update and, get our 3 cameras set up in here. And it's been a massive improvement in the quality. But when you do that, you also uncover some other issues, which is storage. So storage for your footage is, that's a thing. That's a problem. And so I think we've got terabytes and terabytes of footage from our shows. And we're not even recording at the highest possible quality. We could have a lot more than that, 400 episodes. Now, we have only been doing this setup for probably, I'll call it close to 70 shows, 70 episodes. But before that, even like we've got stuff that goes back into all sorts of grainy footage and things like that. So we rebuilt all of this around the mindset of we wanted to dress to impress. We wanted people to be interested in partnering with us so that we could extend what we do and, kind of, grow this community in the construction space and encourage people and make the industry a little bit better of a place.
So you've invested for the last 70 episodes into this whole setup. What's your thoughts on in-person recording versus remote recording?
In-person is my favorite, for one.
Okay.
I do like the in-person recordings because you can just take a little more time, and there's no technical issues most of the time that you get with just recording digitally that can become an issue. At times we've run into a lot of that. It's just a matter of sit them down at the mic and let's go. Let's get it done. Right. I like that a lot. However, when you have a busy schedule, like Eddie and I both do, because we're running other businesses, when you have somebody fly in from Austin, Texas, or fly in from California, they spent, hours and hours trying to get to you to sit down for this show. You are not going to just sit down with them for 45 minutes, record an episode, and then just take them right out the front door and be like, hey, great to see you. Bye.
Thank you.
Right. And so that ends up being a chance where we go out to lunch, we go hang out a little bit, take them over, get coffee, little stuff like that. So what used to be digitally that 45-minute show where we would sit here and we would talk, it would be, an hour start to finish, we knock it out, and then everybody hangs up and we move on with our day. It's turned into a lot more of an event where we have to take them out. So I think there's a balancing act that needs to happen there. If you want to do something in person like that, realize that you're going to need to spend at least 3 hours versus with a digital recording like this on Riverside, you can be done in an hour much quicker because you don't feel the almost guilt of not taking them out for lunch and, almost as like we're going to hang out a little bit longer. Now, if your play is bringing people in so that you can build relationship and potentially sell them on something or find partnerships and things like that, by all means, have them come in, spend the 3 hours with them. But a lot of times, not everybody that came through the door is going to be somebody that is going to purchase something from our business or even be able to introduce us to somebody that can really change the game. So, but they introduced us, it was fun to talk to them. So you just kind of have to balance that out. And those are the things that I started to realize whenever we started to do things in person versus just online and just through Riverside. Just a little bit more of a time commitment when you do things in person, but it can be a lot more fun. It's pros and cons.
Yeah, no, 100%. And so a bit of a curveball for you here, Tyler. When you start interviewing people in person that have to literally fly out to you, right?
Yeah.
How does that conversation go? Like, hey, it's going to be, probably $300 of back and forth plane ticket to come to here, and you're probably going to have to spend the night. And by the way, we're going to go to lunch because I can imagine lunch is okay on you, potentially. How do you have that conversation when, especially if you start out, right, and you start getting guests in? Is it the role of the podcaster to pay for all this? Is it the guest? How does it work?
Guest pays for it. So we don't pay for it, but that's a matter of saying like, hey, do you have any business or anything like that that's going to bring you into Atlanta here in the next couple months? And a lot of times they go, yeah, actually, I'm going to go over here. And I'd be like, all right, sweet. Let's just schedule it for them. Just swing down here, stay the night, and then you can go do that other thing and fly out. And so if they can tie it in with another activity that is going to be good for their business, then it's a win-win. Because at the end of the day, what we're doing is we're advertising them. We're putting them in front of our entire audience. So it's beneficial to them for one. But also they get to go have lunch with another client or something like that. So yeah, we don't pay for them to come in, because at the end of the day, they're getting value by being here
as well.
You know,
100%.
the cost of being on the show is a plane ticket and some hotel and a rental car, and that's it.
It's a painful one, man, because I don't think there are lots of people who might just fly by Montpellier, south of France, for some business. So it's a whole different conversation. But
Yeah,
I get
yeah.
you. I get you.
I might fly to France. I don't know. Maybe.
Oh,
I might
really?
find some business over there somehow, some way.
Here we go.
Who
If you pass
person
by,
like that?
look at that. I have a lovely studio. Happy to record in person.
Heck yeah.
Talk to me about the partnership model, Taylor. How do you get to, hey, we're going to hold ourselves accountable and hire an editor from the get-go and see what happens in the construction space once we start publishing episodes, to having a 400 episodes podcast, like best-in-class studio and partners? How does that, and I think we talked about partners, and you had names like Dell, Intel, NVIDIA, QuickBase, Kubota. I mean, you have some big time names out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you get there?
You got to have a good product for one. And then you also need to give them enough to actually entice them. Just simply saying like, hey, run ads with us initially, it just really isn't enough to entice them. You need to let them have a little more skin in the game and a little more say. And so that can get sticky. Right? Because you can end up interviewing people that you don't really want to interview, like that. Like,
Not going to give names.
Yes. And I'm not going to slander anybody, but that can be a danger of it, is that they feed you somebody that like, maybe it's the same conversation that you've already had, just a different mouth moving. And so that can be a challenge. But, the whole idea behind the partnership is that we wanted to grow this show. They wanted to grow their awareness in the space. Let's do this together. Let's try to link arm in arm, and we can help each other out. And so, it's had its strengths, it's had its weaknesses, as with anything in business. But I will say this, like, we would not be here if it were not for, people getting behind us, like the Dells, the Intels, the NVIDIAs in the world, the Bluebeams, the QuickBases, the Kubotas. Like, we would not have near the studio, near the engine that we have, without those people getting behind us and being super generous and helping us out. At the end of the day, I think they want to make the industry a better place too, right? And so it all fits into that. And so yeah, for us, it's the partnership. The reason behind it was, we started realizing if we do want to scale this thing, we do want to have multicam, we do want to have, a studio space and have some flexibility, and we needed the cash flow. We needed people to help us out with that. And frankly, it's just not enough of an option for us to fund the whole podcast out of our own marketing budget. So basically what ends up happening is they pay to market themselves, but as a result, they're also marketing us. And so that's a fun little turn that can happen there. I think at the end of the day, we wanted to expand our team. We wanted to do other things. We wanted to see what we could do, especially like in-person recordings. And we couldn't just bring them into, a room that was bare with a mic dangling from the ceiling and say, all right, well, this is our podcast.
So cool.
They would be pretty bummed out if they just saw that, right?
I bet.
So we got to dress it up and make people see like, hey, no, there's value in being here, and we've invested heavily in it. And, we're trying to invest in the industry and make it a better place. And so partners allow us to do that.
Cheers, man. This is gold. So, Tyler, you've been taking the wave right at the perfect time, right? Starting the podcast in 2019. Then you go on video at the right time to make the show explode. You're partnering with, probably some of the biggest companies out there. NVIDIA is literally the biggest company out there in terms of capitalization. What's next for the Construction Brothers? Give us a hint of what you're going to do and what we should potentially think about doing if we have a podcast and we want to make it successful in the future.
I think the refocus for us over 2025 is just a continued pursuit of finding the things that interest us, right?
Okay.
And I think that can be, again, just kind of coming back to some of the other stuff we talked about, is that if you're not interested in what you're talking about, you're not going to do it for a very, very long time, right? And so we are kind of coming back to this place of saying, what are the things, who are the people that we want to talk to? And so that's the focus right now. And so in 2025, we're focusing on just finding great people to bring interesting insights to us.
Yeah.
To, it's at the end of the day, if we're getting stuff out of it, then our listeners are going to get stuff out of it, right? And I think most of the time, what ends up happening is that when you have a partnership agreement like that, then you can get guided into saying certain things or doing certain things that, it's for the sake of the business, and that's fine. But we're moving back away from some of that stuff now that we've grown a lot, and we're saying like, okay, we're just going to talk to the people we want to talk to. So, that's all because if we want to keep this going to 10 years, we're at 5 years now. If we want to go to 10 years, we have got to, we've got to stay engaged. So
is that the objective? To make it last 10 years?
Or more? Who knows? It could be 20, it could be 30.
Bam!
I could be 90 years old and still
record.
One person listening, and that's it.
True hardcore podcaster, man.
Yeah.
That's what I like.
Yes.
Tyler, this was absolutely gold. Thank you so much for this. If people want to find out more about you, the Construction Brothers, or what you guys are doing, where should they go?
Yeah, if you want to listen to Construction Brothers, go to brospodcast.com, and you can look us up. Just Construction Brothers, orange logo. You won't miss it. It's up Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you get your podcast, things like that. And then if you want to just connect with me directly, if you got any questions or anything like that, happy to help out. Connect with me on LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, that's the best place. So Tyler Campbell on LinkedIn. Dude in the blue shirt, that is me.
We'll put all the links in the description. And man, I'm just thinking the domain name brospodcast.com must be worth like a little bit of money. That's such a cool name.
Can't believe we were able to pick it up.
Yeah. How did we do that? That's so good. Tyler, thank you so much for coming on Podcast Gurus.
Thank you, Guillaume.